For once, Nick Krall said exactly what we hoped he would say after something that we didn't exactly like.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Reds podcast. Locked On Reds is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network in all the land. Thanks for helping make that happen. And as always, we are your team every day. My name's Stephen Offenbaker. His name's Jeff Carr. We are lifelong Cincinnati Reds fans. We are lifelong baseball fans. We love talking about the Reds. We love talking about baseball, so much so that we've done it talking about the Reds in podcast form for a combined 14 seasons. On today's show, a little bit later, we're going to get into what the Reds outfield can look like now with the recent additions and after we've heard from Nick Krall, because he had a lot of things to say during his media availability session. And it leaves us wondering, how much more does he have to prove? How much has he proven? How much more does he have to prove? We're going to get into that in just a few minutes. But where we'll start today really is with Nick Krall, because he kind of set the record straight and finally did an availability that doesn't leave me thinking that he has the taste of the great value sneakers in his mouth, which is a rarity for Nick Krall. It might be the first time Nick Krall has done that. We're going to get into that on today's show that is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. All right, Jeff, Nick Krall, he did some talking. He said some things, and usually when that happens, we get, 4 or 5 shows worth of commentary out of it because Nick says Nick things, and he didn't exactly do that this time.
No, you and I weren't that enthused by the signing of J.J. Bleday and the trade for Dane Myers, and we were very worried that Nick Krall was going to get on the mic, or in this case on the Zoom, and tell us that he just found his cleanup hitter. Thankfully, he did not do that. And in fact, as you mentioned with the great value sneakers thing, there were multiple opportunities for him during this availability to put that foot in his mouth. And it seemed like it would go a little bit left, go a little bit right. He was dodging them at every turn, and he really had some good answers here. He started off, of course, by really just laying it all out there, what he thought about the players that he just acquired. And of course, he's not going to say, well, bleh, but I think what he said was exactly what he needed to say.
Bleday is a guy that is obviously the defensive stuff has struggled in center field, but he's been a solid corner. He's provided some power. He's a left-handed hitter that could be, is going to compete for an everyday spot, and we'll see what happens. Dane Myers is a guy that we think can come in. He can play center field. He's averaged to above in center field. Over the last 3 years, he's hit 297 against last 3 years against left-handed pitching, and he's 360 on base. We really think he can help that group, whether it's Bleday, Benson, Friedl, giving guys days off and improve the defense as well.
I love that he said that Bleday can compete for an everyday playing time, and we'll see what happens. He's not penciling him into the opening day lineup right now, and he's not saying that Dane Myers is going to play 100 ball games this year. He's saying that Dane Myers is depth. I love that.
I was happy to hear him talk about Dane Myers from a platoon standpoint, talking about those splits, or maybe he just listened to us yesterday and was like, man, that guy's pretty good against left-handed pitching. We should do that. I hope it wasn't a discovery, but I was very happy to hear Nick talk about that, because like you and I talked about when we broke down these acquisitions, the only way that Dane Myers should see the field is facing left-handed pitching. He shouldn't be anywhere near a right-handed pitcher because the splits are just so dramatic. I also like hearing that we're going to look at Bleday from a corner outfield perspective. We're not going to try and shoehorn him back into center field to give TJ Friedl relief. He was very bad. So those two things are very, very encouraging from the standpoint of if that is how Nick truly feels, he also recognizes that there's more work to be done, which was our biggest concern when it comes to Nick Krall, and our biggest concern when it comes to this Reds front office, because what you and I were both afraid of is taking the totality of our Reds knowledge and what we've watched this team do over the years. this was one of those kind of things where they shouldn't be done. This shouldn't be it, but it's the Reds we're talking about, and they very well could have been done, and this could have been it. And it doesn't sound like that's the case. It sounds like there's still opportunity, at least, for the Reds to continue to improve this outfield, improve this lineup, and get better before pitchers and catchers report out in Goodyear.
Funny you mentioned that, because he actually went into specifics on that based on the 2 deals that they made and the money that it'll cost for both players.
Dane Myers is 0 to 3 guy. JJ Bleday we got on a deal that it was close to where his arbitration salary is going to be. We got some more money to be able to use. We looked at these deals as, you know, potential upside, but it also allows us to continue to try to make this team better.
There's something about Nick Krall in the way that he says things, and we're pretty used to this by now. 5 years into his tenure, he started on October 8th of 2020, and here we are more than 5 years past that date. But there's something about Nick Krall that when he says something that is very just like, almost like he just completely glosses over that means it is the absolute truth. And so that means that it's the absolute truth that they have more money to spend. Because he didn't swallow hard. He didn't think about it. He didn't try to come up with a, pithy way of saying it. He just literally said, yeah, we got more money to spend. So I believe that part. And then the other part of this too, like he said 0 to 3 for Dane Myers. That means he's pre-arbitration. He hasn't even hit arbitration yet. He is going to be 30 years old. So I'm not like getting excited about the fact that the Reds have like lots of team control of Dane Myers, but there is a little bit more of a runway there than you initially expect for a guy that you just trade a prospect that not a whole lot of people know about for. But I like how he set that up, and he's just like, we're still looking to make moves, because he was also pressed on this. And this was the thing that you and I were the most worried about, is that going and getting JJ Bleday and Dane Myers and adding them to this just rabble of outfielders now officially makes the outfield set. He did not commit to that.
Look, we're going to try to improve the rest of the offseason. I mean, I think we want to figure out if there's a way to get better. And, I think we've got a good group to go in and compete, but you're always looking to get better.
Look, it's the most boring thing he could have said, right? But honestly, there's a lot of times where he says things that are just like, dude, Nick, why are you saying that? Just say the boring thing sometimes, Nick. He said the boring thing. I feel better.
See, that was the question that most of the time gets us 2 or 3 shows. That was the question where Nick Krall fails and says all kinds of random things that leaves everybody going, what? And then you and I's work is done for the week. We have lots to talk about. This is probably one of his best press availabilities, as from a standpoint of saying the things that need to be said, telling us a little bit that in a controlled manner, and just not making it worse. He didn't make it worse. So where that leaves us, Jeff, is I believe he's still out there working on things. We've seen some reports about the asking price for Luis Robert still from the Chicago White Sox. We've seen that could still be high. We've seen that the blowback amongst the fan base, that trade split right down the middle, as far as I can tell, talking to people on social media of the likes and
it is in White Sox circles as well too, which is kind of funny.
So for me, it means that Nick is still out there working the phones and trying to get something done, which is the most important part of this right now. We're in the part of the year now. We're going to get through New Year's this week. And then we really get into the nitty gritty of, if something's going to get done, it's got about 2 or 3 weeks to get done, because then everybody's minds shift towards, we got to get the trucks packed. We got to get everybody out to Arizona. We got to get things done, because pitchers and catchers report 2 weeks after that. So now is the time, if he's going to be working the phone lines and try and get something going that hasn't been speculated, hasn't been reported, one of those out of the blue deals, which anything now would be, now is the time. So I hope that this is an indication that Nick has been kind of starting that process already.
Yeah, and I think that's the important part of this, is that he doesn't think that they're done. Whether that is just making sure we get through this question without making things worse, because honestly, he could have come out and said, yes, we believe that JJ Bleday is our cleanup hitter. He did not say that, thankfully. But, he said the right things with all of that. So with that being said, he's not done. He needs to make more moves. What does that mean? Because when you evaluate Nick Krall, the way that you should evaluate Nick Krall, the way that you should evaluate general managers, president of baseball ops, the guys that lead front offices, he's still got a lot to prove. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the game tips off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Whether you're looking at Pacers games, Cavs games, whether you're looking at your favorite players all around the country, FanDuel has you covered. Plus, you can still jump in on some great action with college basketball and the Bearcats, and of course, bowl games, at least for a couple of weeks here. You got the Bearcats in the Liberty Bowl, and then the Ohio State, they're doing something too. There's some kind of postseason game that they're in. So before tip-off on Fridays, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Thank you for making Locked On Reds your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now, take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Reds with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 if you pay for the year in advance. You get 2 months for free. Go to lockedonreds.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more.
See, you make fun of Ohio State, you stumble through the lead-in. That's what you get. Go ahead. Keep it up.
Yeah, whatever. They're doing this playoff thing. That's what matters to Ryan Day more anyway. He doesn't care about Michigan. When it comes to anyway, back to the Reds. When it comes to Nick Krall and the job that he has done, he took over the Reds front office on October 8th, 2020. And since that point, I went back, I looked at every single move, and I'm not even talking about like the minor league moves where guys didn't debut. Anybody who had consequence on the major league level that Nick Krall added, or Nick Krall traded away, or Nick Krall signed, or Nick Krall was part of the front office that drafted, because I know that Nick Krall doesn't make the official draft calls. That's like a different guy in the front office, but he's the grand poobah of it all. Looking at that for 5 years, there is an interesting number, because we like to talk about players, especially when you're talking about like Hall of Fame cases, when you're talking about their overall career. We talk about wins above replacement. We talk about WAR first. When it comes to WAR and Nick Krall, for these 5 years, he has acquired 58.2 wins above replacement. This is according to Baseball Reference. And he has traded away 50.7. So in 5 years, Steve, he has made a difference of 7.54.
And
for this.
And we know that level we want people to be at is 2 WAR, right? 2 WAR a season is what
the everyday player,
everydayer guy, right? And so over a 5-year period, that would be 10 WAR for Nick Krall, and he didn't get there. He fell short. Look, I like this breakdown that you're doing. This is very interesting, because we use WAR around here for just a quick glance look at it. Like, is the guy doing good? Is he overachieving? Like, what is happening here? What is this season that he's putting up? How is he doing in his job? And when you look at that graphic that you made, it tells a story just really quick at a glance that while Nick Krall has done some things, he seemingly is falling just a little bit short of where he should be to continue to move this team forward, which really that supports the narrative we've had all along about Nick Krall, which is, well, he's not doing terrible. His bosses love him because he's doing what they're asking him to do. But the grand scheme of things, if the goal is to win, if the goal is to get to the postseason and win postseason series and God, heaven forbid, get to the World Series and win a trophy, if that's the goal, Nick Krall's still falling a little bit short, and the numbers support that.
Yeah, he's a guy that we kind of like, right? Like, I still think there's a lot of times that we're like, man, I feel like the jury's out on him. And the fact that we're still at this point, this is where we were with David Bell before David Bell was fired, in that, we didn't think that he was the biggest part of the problem, but we also didn't think he was the biggest part of the solution. The problem with Nick Krall is he's got to be the biggest part of the solution because he's the guy that makes the final decisions on putting the roster together. And so that's the hardest part with all of this. So for those Nick Krall defenders, because I know that there are some, for the Nick Krall defenders, I can see a little bit from where they're coming from. They're going to cherry pick the good moves. Nick Martinez was a good move, 6.3 WAR in 2 seasons. Here's the problem with that summation. Outside of players that the Reds have drafted during Nick Krall's tenure, Nick Martinez has the best WAR mark. And the biggest deal that Nick Krall made, Steve, we all know it, the Candy Man.
The Candy Man.
Negative 1.6 WAR in 2 seasons. So
he ain't helping the WAR total this year.
No, and yeah, maybe he's actually probably helping it because he's not going to be a negative. So addition by subtraction. But when it comes to the players that Nick Krall has traded away, both Eugenio Suarez and Sonny Gray have eclipsed their WAR total elsewhere than they were in Reds uniforms. Obviously, Sonny Gray a little bit shorter than Eugenio Suarez, but Eugenio Suarez still has more WAR outside of being a Cincinnati Reds player. So there were definitely some players that we looked at and we said, okay, at the time, makes sense. You got to get rid of them. You got to move on because you're not going to sign them and all this other stuff. I understand that. I'm not begrudging the fact that that trade happened. What I'm saying is what the Reds got back has not outweighed what they got rid of.
Yeah, I think for me, there's a couple glaring needs for improvement with some of the work Nick Krall's done. Now, I like overall kind of his approach, at least being consistent with what he says he's going to do. That's been a breath of fresh air with this front office because it hasn't really always been the case around here that the front office does what it says. But keeping that in mind, he's had some swings and misses that when you're in that job for this team with the limited resources that this team gives him, it's not the limited resources that they have because they have more, but what they give him, you can't miss as badly on players as he's missed on guys like Jeimer Candelario. That deal was a horrific miss for this franchise. And for a team like the Dodgers or the New York Mets, it was nothing to say, well, that didn't work. Get him out of here. But for a team like the Reds to be giving that much money to a player to stay home, to just please don't ever come to this ballpark again, to pay him as much money as they are for him to do that, it's a big deal. It's a big deal for the operating budget. It's a big deal in the flexibility to improve the team. So for him to sit on the Zoom call and say, we've still got more money, we've got room to maneuver, that's a big deal. My ears, I perked up when he said that. And now I need to see what he does with that because I thought maybe we weren't going to have that opportunity. And now we know he has room to work. I need him to go work. I need him to finally hit on one, Jeff. That's really the next piece. That's the next evolution for him is to get that mid-level signing, that signing of a name where, oh, we know who that is. Are they going to still be able to contribute? He hasn't really hit on one of those yet. He needs to hit.
Right. And I think it's intriguing too. Like if you look at some different things, at least according to Fangraphs, because he continues to preach, we're not looking for power, we're looking for line drives, because if you're a line drive hitter, you'll eventually hit 25 homers in Cincinnati. And while you can really nitpick that 25 homer comment, because there's not been a lot of guys that have done that during his tenure, there is something that is interesting. And I kind of, eyebrow raise whenever I saw this. For the last 5 years, so 2020 through 2025, you can go to Fangraphs and you can look at like team leaders or player leaders and all this other stuff. Fangraphs actually says that the Reds have the highest line drive percentage of any Major League Baseball team from 2020 through 2025. And so actually, I'm just now realizing I need to be 2021 through 2025. So let's change that. Okay, he's still right. So their strategy is at least working. But what he continues to say and what we continue to see with different players is all of the peripheral stuff, all of the stuff below the surface continues to match up. It's the stuff above the surface, the actual production, the actual successes, all of that stuff that we still haven't seen. So how he translates what's below the surface to what we can see is going to be the measure of how he is remembered here in Cincinnati, because I think it's very clear that if you talk to 10 Cincinnati Reds fans about Nick Krall, and I'm just saying 10 because, quite frankly, I don't want to talk to more than 10 people during a baseball game, but that is what it is. But when you talk to 10 people during a baseball game about Nick Krall, you're going to get 10 different answers.
Yeah, and interesting, I don't know that right now Nick Krall will be remembered in the city of Cincinnati.
Right.
This has been one of those eras of baseball that when you're talking about the history of this team will just get glossed over because they haven't won anything, they haven't done anything. There's nothing really to celebrate. The last 10 years, the biggest thing really is the retirement of Joey Votto. That had Nick Krall has nothing to do with that other than not signing him and letting David Bell abuse him in the home stretch there. So I feel like Nick Krall hasn't done anything to create a legacy for himself, and that's really should be the motivating factor. Is not wondering how he's going to be remembered, is wondering if he's going to be remembered, and he needs to act very, very quickly. But here we are now, Jeff. We've arrived at a place where Nick Krall has work to do. He said he has the availability of money to go do some work. So the question is now, what does this Reds outfield look like? How is it set up right now with the guys on board? And where are the glaring needs still? We're going to talk about that coming up next. Can't watch us here on YouTube, guess what? We are on every single audio podcasting platform that's in existence, I think. Well, maybe not all of them, but you find one we're not on, you need us to be there. Let Jeff know. He can make it happen for you 100% of the time. You can take us on the road, take us in the car, take us to the gym, take us to work with you. We're always available for you talking Reds baseball. All right, let's get into what this outfield looks like, Jeff. We got to kind of set it up now, where we are, what Nick Krall had to say. There were some interesting inclusions in him talking about the outfielders competing for jobs and the outfielders that will be available for jobs. And I know you sure leaped to a smile when Nick Krall, had those things to say.
Beeman, Willie Beeman. Really happy to see that he included Will Benson in his commentary, because quite frankly, I think that you and me and most of Reds country thought the last that we saw of him was getting pulled with 2 strikes in a playoff game in favor of a right-handed hitter. So I think that there's at least some hope for those of us that love Will Benson to see him do some more things in a Reds uniform. I think it was interesting that he included him. That could be like a still for a time being thing. So I'm not like sold that he's going to make the opening day roster or anything like that. But at the same time, him being mentioned in this is intriguing. And the other part for me outside of Will Benson was the mention of getting TJ Friedl some more off days, some more times where he doesn't have to play every single day. They're not asking him to play 162 games. In fact, I think that likely they would rather him play like 130, like 120 to 130. Yeah.
We don't do that here. What are you
Is that the theme? By the way, and real quick aside here, like, is that the theme for 2026 for the Cincinnati Reds is off days? Like, it feels like that's where we're headed here.
That's the banner next year. For this year was Ellie played 162, and the next banner is going to be Ellie had a day off. That's going to hang right up. It's going to look great behind home plate.
So 2025, Ellie played 162. 2026, Ellie didn't play 162. That's how it's going to go.
Those are the banners.
But to his credit, he was talking about Dane Myers really giving some days off for TJ Friedl. Last year, we started to see TJ Friedl really morph into a traditional left-handed hitter where he hit righties a lot better than he hit lefties, because for his career, he's been the opposite. Actually, it's lefties better than righties. But last year, he had a 40-point difference in his on-base percentage and a 50-point difference in his slugging percentage. He was better 40 points and 50 points against right-handers than he was against lefties.
So true splits versus reverse splits. He had true splits as a left-handed batter versus right-handed pitching.
So getting him out of there in those situations for Dane Myers is going to be something. So I kind of feel like Dane Myers is almost a shoe-in to be on this opening day roster. I feel like JJ Bleday is as well, although, and I do want to look into this more because this is just a surface thought. This is not I've really done analysis on this, but a surface thought for me for JJ Bleday is he's basically just Jake Fraley.
That's fair. Do you have TJ Friedl splits in front of you?
I
Do
do.
you have what is his OPS plus split as a left-handed batter versus a right-handed pitcher?
So versus righties last year, he was 16% better than league average against right-handed hitters. He was only 7% worse against lefties, but still
And
that's
then you add that to Dane Myers' split, which was ridiculous. He was 47% better
146,
against league average,
147,
147, somewhere in there. That's a pretty good outfielder you build if
50
you
point
platoon. If you platoon TJ Friedl and Dane Myers in center field as a true platoon, that's a pretty good outfielder.
And based on, because I talked with our Locked On Marlins guy about him, because obviously he watched him every day, so he knows Dane Myers pretty well. And he said, man, he's got an arm. You're going to love watching him play defense out there, and just make sure he doesn't play against right-handed pitching, and he's going to be okay. So I do love the fit there. My thing with JJ Bleday, and it's interesting because his splits say that he doesn't necessarily have a split. Like, he's not really that much better against righties than he is against lefties. So ideally, that means he is an everyday ball player, but not having a split against those different types of pitchers simply means he just doesn't have much of a difference in performance-wise. So what you see on the back of his baseball card for the year of our Lord 2025 is who he is. And there's not like let's squint really hard and say, well, if you put him in this situation, he's much better. And I heard people say, well, the second half of 2025 was so much better for JJ Bleday than the first half. We do that for everybody. We did that for Gavin Lux. Look what happened last year with Gavin Lux. Like, yeah.
These are the same people that wanted to send Matt McClain down to AAA. So let's let's not get caught up in that. JJ Bleday's splits, though, Jeff, when you're talking about, well, he doesn't really have much of a split. Well, that doesn't matter when your overall performance is below or just at league average. I think his split versus right-handed pitching, we talked about it yesterday, was like 104, like 4% better than league average. So it's not really much to commentary on it anyway, other than to say, he exists, replacement level. So, I'm not super excited about that, but I was excited to hear that he's just not being gifted a spot. To your point on Will Benson, I still say that there's probably a 75% chance that Will Benson starts the season in AAA down in Louisville. He has an option available. Will Benson's great insurance. But if Nick Krall is being true to his word, and he has been thus far, then he is out there looking for another outfielder. He's out there looking for somebody that's going to bring this team some offense. And that's going to make it even harder for Will Benson to make this team, given the moves that have been made in the offseason. So 75% chance I think he goes Louisville.
I wonder a little bit about that, though. Like, let's consider this for just a moment. They've got Noelvi Marte penciled in every day in right field. You've got TJ Friedl and Dane Myers in center. And you've got JJ Bleday and, let's say, Spencer Steer in left field. You could go get anybody. You could go get any position that you want and try to solidify a different area. You don't necessarily have to be married to the outfield. Because I will say this as well. There was one other thing, and I didn't clip it, but he was talking about how these moves affect other guys on the roster. And he specifically said, Nick Krall specifically said, this is a direct quote. I'm not paraphrasing. I'm not reading between the lines. Direct quote from Nick Krall was, this makes Gavin Lux a utility infielder more so than a utility outfielder, which I was really happy to see because he was very bad defensively out there. So,
and there's some concern there looking at that group of outfielders you just named. That is very lefty platoon heavy. Like, that is a very heavy group of left-handers that cannot hit left-handed pitching. So you look at that, it almost has to be another move, which then I think, again, makes trouble for Will Benson. There's too many, lefty dominant performers there to squeeze into one outfield group. You run into some real problems with in-game maneuvering there when everybody is this left-handed and can't hit left-handed pitching.
I am happy, though, that we are talking about potential moves here, because I was worried for a minute that these were the moves and that we were done and that we were going into Reds Fest and celebrating the arrival of JJ Bleday and Dane Myers. But when it comes to, what Nick Krall said, like, we will continue to be all over the rumors and talk about whatever's coming down the pipe. I saw, and the reason that I waited till the very end of the podcast to even mention this is because I don't think it's a reliable source, but I saw an unreliable source talking about the fact that the White Sox were looking for Chase Petty, Hector Rodriguez, and a compensatory pick for Luis Robert and for them to pay down half of Luis Robert's contract. And that's a hard no, even for me. And I kind of want them to get Luis Robert. That's too much. My sticking point on that one's Hector Rodriguez, because I think he's ready to play this year. I don't know what he's going to be. I still think he's a lottery ticket, but I don't think that you give that up for Luis Robert, and where the Reds, I think, only believe that he's a one-year player. I would be shocked if the Reds pick up his club option for next year. I think he would have to be really good to do that. And so that would be a silly trade to make for a guy that's only going to be here for 1 year. But that's an unreliable source. It could not be that bad. It could be worse. But we'll see exactly what Nick Krall's got cooking, because we're going to be all over this every single day here on the Locked On Reds podcast. We want to thank you for making us part of your day. Make sure you follow us on Twitter. You can follow me at Jeff Carr with 3 Fs. You can follow Steve at S. Offenbaker with 2 Fs. And you can follow the show at Locked On Reds. There's no Fs in that. By the way, did we make your Spotify Wrapped? I think we're still like in the Spotify Wrapped season. That's almost over. But if we did, we would appreciate you giving us a shout out on social media. Make sure you tag the National Locked On Podcast Network account. You'll get a free month of the Everydayer Club for Locked On Reds free. No ads, Discord access, all the good stuff. And by the way, you can learn more about that at lockedonreds.substat or supercast.com. You know, that's always in the back of my mind that I don't mess that up, and I messed it up again. Supercast.com.
It's because you said Ryan Day.
And the link's in the description down below. So that's probably a more reliable way to get there anyway. But coming up on the next Locked On Reds podcast, we will dive a little bit more into some comps, because, yeah, JJ Bleday, Jake Fraley kind of seem a little bit similar to me. I want to dive into that a little bit more. So we will on the next Locked On Reds. I know, exciting stuff, right? It's the off season and we're in the middle of it, and we'll be all over the rumors here because we are Locked On Reds every single day.
I hope people stuck around for this, because I am 100% certain that the Nick Krall Defenders is the name of your comic book club.
Not at all. You think
I know it is. I know it is.
Wait a minute. You think I'm the guy that does that?
100%. No, 100%.
Oh.
Nick Krall Defenders.
I don't mind them, but it's not
President,
like
President Jeff Carr.
The one thing that he has done, the one thing that has happened under his tenure is that they've lost 100 games in a season. So right now he's got to make up for that. I'm not saying
that's the name of your comic book club.
Oh my God. I'm going to stick my ATST on you.